Greetings, traveler. I'm sure when you're thinking about your own game development journey, sometimes you're wondering, how can I create all these wonderful games, although I have some disadvantage? Perhaps you think you're lacking money, you think you're lacking the skills, or you don't know the people who can make the best game making team. And I was no different. I felt that I had all these disadvantages going into game development and that I couldn't possibly compete with other more seasoned, more experienced people in the field. And I could definitely not play on the same level. However, I realized that the more I was thinking this way, the more I was holding myself back, specifically because what I considered my disadvantage turned out to be my greatest advantage. And what I want to do today is share a story that was really motivational for me when I heard it, and also share a bit of my own experience of how that played out in practice when I started working in the games industry. And in the end, I want to share a few ideas about how perhaps somebody else could use the same approach to their advantage. So let's jump in. If you don't know who I am, my name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 15 years now. I've been playing video games ever since I can remember, basically. And when I started actually working in the games industry, I remember that joining the team of developers, of game designers, I immediately felt at a disadvantage because even though I loved games and I had a lot of experience in analog games, so board games and the like, and card games, I suppose, I didn't have any hands-on video game development experience, especially compared to everybody else at the team there. So I thought, well, how could I possibly compete with these guys? They've all been doing game design specifically for at least 5 years each. And my background, at least academically, is not even in game design, it's in computer science. So yes, adjacent, but not directly helpful. So how could I compete? And over the years, I tried to wrestle with that and I tried to find a way to press my advantage. And I think no story showcases this situation better than this one. So I heard that there was a family with 3 sons and they were all coming into the age now where they could start earning money. They were still young, right? But they could do some little jobs here and there, maybe part-time, to earn some money. And one of the sons had a disability, had an actual disfigurement on his head. So when the family was discussing, they were wondering how the 3 boys would be able to secure jobs, particularly the one with the disfigurement, right? He had this great disability. Who would hire him for what, to do what job? So after some time passed, the 2 boys that didn't have anything special about them, they were just completely normal, they were still struggling to find a job because all the obvious jobs were already taken in that town. So the little helping jobs and the little part-time jobs, all those were taken by similar boys. So they were struggling a little bit. The boy with the disfigurement, however, had a great time and was immediately capable of getting some money for himself. So how was that even possible? So one of the common things that little boys did back then, many years ago, where this happened is he would be selling newspapers. And selling newspapers is not exactly the biggest leverage, high-paying job there is. It's very tough. You have to convince people to get newspapers from you versus everybody else who's selling newspapers. And even if you do, you get very little money for it. However, the advantage that he found to press, I don't know whether this was knowingly or unknowingly, is that due to his disfigurement, he was definitely standing out. So people would look at him and they would feel sorry for him. They would think, oh, poor boy, and they would notice him more versus everybody else. So compared to every other boy who was selling newspapers, he absolutely stood out. And, he thought nothing of his situation. He thought, it is what it is. And he pressed on. He was selling newspapers. And it was a big hit. He was getting a lot more clients than everybody else who was doing the same job around him, all the other little boys. So when his brothers asked him how he's doing so well, he said it is because of his particular situation and what he considered a disadvantage that he managed to be so successful. And I thought that's amazing because, when you're thinking about that, if you were sitting at home thinking about, oh my God, how am I going to make money with this crazy special situation? There's no logical positive idea that comes to mind. You cannot justify it with logic alone. But once you do it, and once you start working that angle, then you can see the results come for themselves. And if you get the results, you can backwards justify anything. So if it's successful as it is, then little justification is necessary. So how did that work out in my case? So as I mentioned, I was doing game design, but my background was completely in computer science, not for lack of interest, but because back in my day, when I wanted to study something game related, computer science was the closest possible field. There was no game design as a field, so to speak. It wasn't a thing you could study in university. Nothing I had access or knowledge of anyway back then. So my approach was, well, compared to everybody else on the game design team, I definitely know the most about programming in the classical sense. So perhaps I'm not as experienced as them, but what I could do with my weird background is perhaps talk to the engineers better and get to understand what development challenges they're facing when we're asking them to develop X or Y feature for the game. So I noticed that people around me, they were coming up with these wonderful features for the game, but they would be kind of hard to implement. They would take a long time. The implementation would be complicated, and it seemed that the people I was working with, they weren't particularly keen on breaking it down to simple components for the engineers in the team. They were just saying, here's the thing, just make it, it's your job. Now, I mean, I don't know if that's right or wrong, or it could have been done better, but the opportunity I noticed was that if I could break down the tasks from the game design side to an understandable enough level for the engineers and talk directly to them, first of all, it would save a ton of time, because I noticed that was one of the areas the team was spending so much time on, just explaining what the features are and what the engineers have to practically do. And then I could use the time we saved to create more features or help other game designers communicate to the engineering team and so on what could be done. And from the point where I thought that my background was completely useless, in this game it turned out to me to be quite useful. And then it went beyond that. So another thing I managed to do was, because I knew what you could develop relatively easily on a coding in a coding perspective, then I noticed that the game we were making back then was quite dependent on balance. So all games need good game balance, right? But the game we were developing was a team versus team kind of situation with lots of players on the team, and it was difficult to have testing on this on a large scale. So it would take us basically years of real world data to be able to simulate whether we are on point or way off with our game balance. So what I thought would be interesting to do, leveraging our awesome engineering team, is to create a game design tool that would do several epochs of simulations for the game, play matches with itself, and see what the results would be, at least in this simulated environment, which again is not the real world, but it was way better than us speculating about what the real world is like. So I worked again with the engineering team, and we put together a basic simulation environment that would simulate various types of players and their behaviors in the game, whether they would be more defensive or offensive, whether they would choose more this type of skills or that type of skills for the game, and then come up with a statistical distribution for what kind of abilities seem to win more, what kind of team compositions seem to win more, at least on this simulated environment. So that would give us very valuable data about what seems to be overpowered or underpowered, and what we would need to work on later to make the game feel better balance-wise. And that seemed to be quite welcome. that tool seemed to be quite welcome by the game design team. So I thought that, perhaps I'm not as experienced or as clever as these guys, but hopefully this helps everyone do our job better. And it would also give me a few ideas for features to add into the game. So what this means for someone who thinks that perhaps they want to get into game development or game design, and they think that they don't have enough experience, or that they don't have the money to purchase courses or software or books or anything else for that matter, or that they don't know the right people to be able to develop games with. Oh, it's getting dark. So thinking about that and hearing those complaints from people in real life, so people who are still in education while I was already working, or my peers thinking that, oh, I want to do this, but I'm lacking so and so, or I've got this disadvantage, or even physical conditions, right? So some physical disability or some mental disability, which again, I think what society or what people call a disability is just a skill waiting to be used, and I'm sure you've heard many examples of that. So let's quickly tackle those three categories. So the lack of experience, I think, is great because it gives you a clean slate. So yes, it would be great to have 50 years of game design experience or game development experience before doing your next thing, but specifically because you don't have that, you are free from that baggage at the same time. So if you had it and you could leverage it to make something amazing, great. But thinking that you need that in order to do something, to make a game, is not necessarily true. Because if you were to start today on that journey, well, today we have AI, and AI can teach you all sorts of things. It can even create simple prototypes for you to play around with to get a feeling of this new area you're diving into. And later on, you can customize it manually as much as you want. And nowadays, the argument is, is AI a tool that we should be using in game development or we shouldn't? But I've seen this enough times in my career that I know that either way, real people are going to use it to make, really fun games. And the moment they stop doing that, then the game becomes boring. So back in the day, graphics softwares were a thing. So, art that was hand-drawn was highly valued, and things that were made with software was not valued. But the argument was then that because a real person didn't make it, or it wasn't made by hand on a piece of paper, it's not good. But nowadays we know that if you have the skill to put it on paper or on digital medium, you can still create wonderful work. Even before that, there was the argument that every company should make its own game engine to make it extremely customized and extremely suited to their needs, whatever those are. And if you use something that's bought, then you're doing it wrong. But again, nowadays, if we think about that argument, it just seems silly because you can do either one. You can create your own engine and make it as you like, essentially. Yes, it's going to cost more, probably time and more money, but you get to be free from royalties for other companies, and you don't have to obey the rules, and you don't have to get their baggage. You can create whatever you want. Or if you want to actually go for it and use one of the software that's already available, that's great. You can start prototyping as soon as the download finishes. So there's that advantage. If you have enough experience, you can say, is it worth putting the extra time and effort to develop our own thing? Or the same time and money we could use with an existing software to get a better result. So perhaps that's another more interesting choice for the future. And not to say that one or the other is always correct, right? And finally, not knowing the people that could help you create a game, I think that's also a great advantage, because that essentially kind of puts you into a path where you will try to do everything yourself, right? At least I did for me. I thought, well, I don't know exactly the right person who could help me build this game, or I know the right people, but they're all doing other jobs right now. It would be way too expensive. I couldn't afford just paying for everyone to just work for me and make my games, of course. So that instead led me into a situation where I thought, well, what could I do to develop the game as much as possible just on my own, just with the resources I can find freely on the internet, and with YouTube videos and books, and now with like being taught by AI and so on. So having that experience of doing as much as possible by myself gave me an incredibly valuable insight into how things can be done, how different areas of the game connect together, so the graphics, the sound, the coding, the game design, and all that. And when the time came to meet the right people, or the funds were available to pay them and to have them participate in the project, I knew exactly what I would ask from them, and I would waste no time, exploring and giving them a task and say, oh, I would like to make a game like this. Do you think you could make something like that? And they'll be like, yeah, give me 3 months and I'll see what I can do. None of that. So I knew exactly what I would ask from them, and I would be able to jump directly into a conversation about the details and about the implementation itself, saving everyone lots of time and saving me and the company lots of money, and most importantly, getting a better, more fun, more interesting result from the process. So not knowing or not having access immediately to people to help me, and going as far as possible by myself, was useful to me in that way. So if back then I were to think, well, I don't know anyone to help me with this game, and there's no way I could build everything myself, if I stopped there, then I would have stopped there and I wouldn't have made anything. And no matter how many years passed, nobody would magically appear in front of me to help me do things for free, right? But going as far as possible by myself and having something to show people, to say, this is how much I did by myself, but of course I'm not like an expert programmer, artist, sound designer, whatever. It would be great if I could have someone to help me. Having that little silly prototype as a base for the conversation was an excellent tool to get people interested in the project, and even have some people help out for free just because it looked interesting. Again, it's not one step to solve all problems and to make the best AAA game ever, but it's definitely a step that moves things forward. And as soon as you can use all these so-called disadvantages to get to a prototype or even a complete small game, then you already have the potential to sell the game, show it to investors if that's your cup of tea, and get some money and turn it into a real product. And if you have a real game that people are paying real money for, then doesn't that make you a game developer and a game creator? I think it does. So anyway, I hope this sheds some light on how all these so-called disadvantages are actually your gift, the thing that can help you go past all of these perceived barriers. And I would go so far to say that it's because you have these disadvantages, you have a unique viewpoint that can get you way further than everybody else who thinks they have everything they need. And to be honest, nobody thinks they have everything they need. Everybody thinks they're missing something. So use exactly that to press your advantage and see where that road goes. I think it's going to be good. Anyway, I hope that helps at least one other person out there. It's these kind of complaints or skepticisms about I don't have experience, I don't have money, if I had infinite time, and so on. Yeah, time is another one, but well, I think you've heard a lot of advice about time already. So I think if all this makes at least one person take their next step into their game development journey and they keep having fun with it, then I think that's all I could hope for, and I would be extremely happy if that happened. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions about this, or if you have a particular situation that's specific to you and you just don't know how to work through it, and I'll do my best to provide some input. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have fun.